Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Josie's Point of View, where we focus on human interest stories from the Carolinas and beyond. Today it's Saturday and it's December the 3rd, 2023. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to my channel, I'd like to extend to you a warm welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you find the information here to be informative. And if you're a returning viewer, by all means, thank you for coming by. I always say the tide changes so frequently here on these YouTube streets. So you always have to acknowledge where your support comes from. And I want you to know I sincerely thank you for your support. Feel free to like and to share this video. And don't forget to subscribe. Well, it's been a month since my last video, and that's because I took a break. I try to do so every few months just to make sure I don't become overloaded or overstressed. And as you can tell, my subscriber count is not very large. It's still growing, but it's still fairly small. And as a channel that's not monetized, I sometimes step away just to check up on a few of the larger content creators, just to observe what they're doing and to figure out what has made them become successful. But now I'm back and it's back to work. And our story today takes us to Fort Liberty here in North Carolina. Take a look at the headline. And it reads, "The murders of two men on Fort Liberty in 2020 finally solved." I'll provide you with a summary here, and as always, I'll place links to a few of the full articles in the description box. Now, I just want to remind my audience of the name change from Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty, and this took place in June of this year. And I think this is important because even though I am doing videos and I'm saying Fort Liberty, I always get responses back saying, "Where is Fort Liberty?" So keep in mind, Fort Liberty was formerly Fort Bragg until June of this year. So let's go back in time to December of 2020. In fact, the incident that we're talking about today took place on December the 2nd, 2020. We learned that two men had been found murdered on Fort Bragg. And as already mentioned, back it was Fort Bragg then, it's now Fort Liberty. And this was a major incident that left the community in fear, especially since we were just trying to recover and to understand the circumstances surrounding the beheading of another soldier that took place around Memorial Day that same year. Now, and I should mention that case still is not solved. It remains unsolved. So now we have December and the news of two more killing, more trouble, and it pertains to our military base, our military army base. The community was concerned, very concerned, and people began asking whether the military base was really a safe place for soldiers and their families. So initially, Army CID, Army Criminal Investigation Division, was leading this investigation. And a few months after the incident took place in the spring, the FBI came on board and everything went silent until a few months ago when we learned that this is no longer a cold case. It's no longer an unsolved murder case. The murders had been solved. Now, back when the news first broke, there was a lot of secrecy. A lot of information was not made public, and that's understandable. But since then, we've had a lot of revelations, a lot of disclosures, a lot of questions have been answered. So in this video, I am presenting the full story from start to finish. And let me give you notice, this video will be a little bit longer than usual. I try to keep my videos at a very conservative level, but this is an interesting story to say the least. It has a lot of twists and turns, and it makes you wonder whether or not the military tends to turn their eyes away from the misdeeds of their soldiers when they already know what's taking place. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. So on the afternoon of December the 2nd, a hunter out looking for deer on a reservation that's adjacent to Fort Bragg, and this is an area that's accessible to civilians. Now that hunter was on a dirt road. He was driving along the dirt road on the reservation, and as he drove about a half a mile up that particular dirt road, he came across an area where his path was blocked by a gray late model pickup truck pictured here. Now, initially, he thought that maybe the vehicle was just stuck in the soft sand, so he got out of the vehicle to check things out and most likely to offer assistance so that he could get by and get on his way. And as he exited his vehicle, he immediately noticed the shape of a body lying in the pine straw, approximately approximately 30 feet away from the truck. It was a black male in his 30s, and he was wearing civilian clothes. The hunter could see that the deceased male had a puncture wound on the right side of his head near his temple. So the hunter immediately retreated back to his vehicle and contacted the police. Now, he had no reason to suspect any type of foul play. His initial thought was that the deceased man probably had a heart attack while trying to move his vehicle. And when the police arrived on the scene, they found not one body, they found two. One was found lying in the sand area close to the pickup truck, as I previously mentioned, and the other body was found wrapped in a blanket very close to the truck. Both men had been shot. Now, police found multiple shell casings at the scene, but there was no weapons. This led police to believe that there may have been at least one or more persons involved. And based on their assessment, they believe the bodies may have been at that location for a few days. So the bodies were discovered on the afternoon of December the 2nd. And based on the weather as well as the appearance of the surrounding terrain, police theorized that the incident may have occurred around November 30th. And immediately Fort Bragg came forward to say, look, this is not a training accident. It has no relation to our training. This is simply something that happened outside of the military, and it was murder. Now, the two men were identified as 44-year-old Army veteran Timothy Dumas Sr., the black male who was found outside the vehicle, and the second person was identified as 37-year-old active duty Master Sergeant William Levine III from Fort Bragg. And before we divulge into the background and interesting lives of these two men, guess what? There was another murder around the same time. And even though police did not confirm it at the time, there was a high suspicion that this third murder may in some way be related. First, there's 44-year-old Timothy Dumas, who was an Army veteran who living in Pinehurst, North Carolina, which is close by. He served in the Army for 20 years as a property accounting technician and he retired, I should say, as a chief warrant officer, which is a CW3, in 2016. Now, during his military career, he had a few deployments and a very impressive career, I might add. And among his awards, he had earned the Bronze Star, and for those who may not know, the Bronze Star is awarded for valor in combat. Again, he was found deceased outside the truck in a grassy, sandy area, and the autopsy revealed that he died from two gunshot wounds, one to the head and the other to his chest. Now, Dumas owned a navy blue 2015 Dodge Ram pickup truck pictured here, and it was found abandoned and burned in an undisclosed location nearby. And after his body was found, police did search his home in Pinehurst, but they concluded that his home was not the site of a crime scene. We'll revisit his part of his interesting life in a few minutes. The second deceased, 37-year-old active duty Army Master Sergeant William Levine, a highly decorated senior enlisted service member who was assigned to Special Operations Command of Fort Bragg. At the time of his death, he had been in the Army for 19 years, and family say he had just began the process of preparing to leave the military via retirement. But he had a very impressive military career. No one knew much about his private life because he had succeeded in erasing all of his information that one might expect to find in the public domain. I've heard of people doing that, and it seems as if it worked for him because no matter what type of search you did, nothing came up. However, on his death certificate, did reveal that he lived someplace in Hope Mills. They said even the military was not really sure where he lived. It was also revealed that he was a former member of the prestigious Delta Force, but due to misconduct, he had been released from the unit. Now, I won't elaborate on Delta Force, but it's safe to say they're usually the first to go in and the last to leave. Very prestigious military unit. Now, when Levain's body was found, he was curled up next to his truck. He was wearing boxer shorts only, which is not really unusual for Delta Force folks in the wintertime. They usually walk around in those shorts anyway. So he was wearing those boxer shorts and covered by an Army insulated poncho liner, which is a plastic looking liner for a raincoat. So he was wrapped in this poncho liner and placed up against the gray truck found at the scene, and he was the owner of that truck. The autopsy revealed he died from multiple gunshot wounds. He had been shot multiple times. And so the murders became known as the Delta Force murders, and that's because of their association with Fort Bragg and the prestigious Delta Force unit. Now, it was not revealed exactly how the two knew each other, but it's safe to say they had a strong military connection, and the duo had a past that was overshadowed by their interactions with law enforcement officials. They had a criminal history which included drug related arrests and charges, but the full extent of their association will never be fully understood because they are now both deceased. But it was mentioned that they both had pending charges in the civilian courts at the time of their deaths. So let's take a closer look at Dumas. Reports say he had a prior arrest on drug charges, but I did not see any publication that listed him as a felon, so it appears he was never convicted on such charges. It did say that he and Levain had been investigated by Army CID, but and well, they had been investigated for buying and selling narcotics and that they were both facing criminal charges. So I am making the assumptions that they had not yet been convicted. But already mentioned that investigators had been saying that both deaths were the result of a drug deal gone bad. So I do not have any specific drug convictions for Dumas. However, he did have a scheduled court appearance in Forsyth County on a charge of assault, breaking and entering, and impersonating a law enforcement officer. So his body was found on December the 2nd, and the scheduled court date appearance was on December the 17th, 15 days later. Now, I won't go into exactly what police say he did, but that information is available in at least one of the links provided in my description box. Now, when I read about Levain's history, several questions came to mind. I wondered how he was allowed to remain in the military with a background such as his. I just kind of wondered, you know? I wondered whether Fort Bragg authorities had essentially given him a break or given him a free ride, or whether they were in some way intimidated by his status and simply turned a blind eye to his misdeeds. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying these are the things that crossed my mind. So I have to admit, before we move on, I have to say they're all allegedly. As I already mentioned, Levain was no longer associated with the Delta Force unit, but he was assigned to Headquarters Special Operations Command on the base. Now, the relationship between both men, Levain and Dumas, remained a mystery, but it was reported that both men were being investigated on drug charges. Also, it appears that Levain was well known by Fayetteville law enforcement officials, but not in a good way. At the time of his death, he had a pending court case which was scheduled for January on a hit and run with property damage. The court date was January the 15th, which was approximately 5 weeks after he was found. Now, reports also show that he had several prior felony charges for harboring an escapee in September of 2018, and he had maintained a dwelling for the manufacturing of controlled substances. Those are the charges he was facing. The arrest report at that time showed a list of properties seized by investigators, including firearms, narcotics, a crack pipe, a digital scale. Now, the escapee was believed to be his girlfriend at the time, and she did accepted ownership for those misdeeds and those charges. So the charges against Levain were eventually dropped and they were erased from his record. But that's not all. In April of that same year, and we're talking about 2018, Levain shot and killed one of his very close friends at his off-post residence in Fayetteville, and he was able to evade charges. Yes, he was never charged with an offense at that time, although it was reported there were many holes in the information he communicated to police. However, the local police concluded the death was justifiable homicide and involving two military people, and they essentially left it alone. Now, this left friends and family of deceased wondering just how such a determination could have been made, and they concluded that Levain simply got away with murder. Now, the deceased friend was 33-year-old Army Sergeant First Class Mark Lassiter. Lassiter served with the 19th Special Forces Group on the base as a weapons technician, and like Levain, he also had multiple deployments to combat areas. Lassiter and Levain were best friends, and they often vacationed together, according to family members. And it was stated that at the time of the shooting, both families had just returned from a trip to Disney World. Now, Lassiter's sister told the news media that the two men who were best friends, but they also had something else in common. Family members say both men were also known drug users, and specifically, it was alleged that both men were known to use cocaine. That's what the sister and another family member told the news media. They said Lassiter had a desk job on the base after he sustained a traumatic brain injury during one of his deployments, and he became addicted when he grew dependent on the narcotics he was prescribed to treat his medical problem. That's how it got started. And allegedly, he began to self medicate using other narcotic substances, and from that, it went on to cocaine. So, cocaine use was common to both men, and this was confirmed again by more than one family member. Now let's return to the death of Mark Lassiter. Now both men, Lassiter and Levain, their families had just returned from a trip to Disney World, and there was some type of argument between the two men. And this was something they did on a regular basis, so it was not alarming. But on that particular day in April, the argument took on new meaning. Something went wrong, and Lassiter was shot and killed by his best friend Levain. As already mentioned, there were several inconsistencies in the information that Levain communicated to police. First, he told police that his good friend came to him with a screwdriver and he had to shoot and kill him. In another version, he said he could not see Lassiter's hands and could not tell if he had a screwdriver or anything else in it. And in yet another version of the story, he said that Lassiter had killed himself. Now, in a summary from an investigation that was conducted by Special Operations Command, the conclusion was reached that Levain was not credible in a retelling of the incident. But because this case was handled outside of the military, the civilian authorities somehow came to the conclusion that it was justifiable homicide, and Levain was never charged. Family of deceased concluded that Levain shot his friend in cold blood and he got away with murder. So, in addition to Levain's shady past, we now had the Delta First murders, where Levain is gunned down along with another veteran in what has been described as a drug deal gone bad. The FBI took over the case in the spring, and soon the murders went into the cold file, and nobody was really talking about it. So, imagine the shock, the dismay this past August when we all heard the good news. There was an update. There was a significant break in this case because we learned an arrest has been made. That's right, someone was going to be held accountable. We learned that this man pictured here, 23-year-old Kenneth Maurice Quick Jr., was arrested and charged with the murder of Dumas and Levain. Reports say he was indicted on 2 counts of murder, conspiracy to possess and distribute cocaine, firearm and obstruction charges, and 2 counts of the use of a firearm to cause death. Now, these are just a few of the charges, but the summary of the indictment is very detailed. It also mentions him trying to dispose of at least one body, and that's probably why Levain's body was wrapped in that green poncho liner by his truck. He was trying to get rid of it. He was also accused of moving and burning Dumas's truck, which was found abandoned and burned at another location. It's just a mess. And it should not surprise you to hear that this quick person has a lengthy criminal record. At age 23, this was not his first rodeo. It's not his first encounter with police. And he had also been facing a prior murder charge. Imagine that. And so we've reached a milestone in this gruesome murders of 2 service-connected men from December of 2020. They will forever be known as the Delta Force murders. And even though an arrest and an indictment has been made, even though those things are just behind us, the final chapter will take place when a conviction is made, and that will probably be a few more years in the making. So for now, the case has been solved. The Delta Force murders have been closed. And that's all I have for you right now. Feel free to leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about this video. And by all means, feel free to like it and to share it. And if you haven't done so already, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel by clicking on that red subscribe button. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on the bell that looks just like this one, that's the notification bell. If you click on that notification bell, you'll be the first to know whenever a new video is uploaded. I thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.